Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Faith Canter is a foodie, farmer, forager, fermenter, and a formerly plant-based to a currently animal-based holistic nutritionist, herbalist, health coach, author, and trauma-informed therapist. Faith enjoys living a simple, seasonal, local, and sustainable life, learning that the future of health and happiness is going away from our more ancestral ways of eating and living. Now, Faith feels much more connected to our food, community, this planet, our own cycles, and the cycles of life. And she is passionate about returning to our true nature as human beings. Faith is the author of several books written when she was plant based, plus a few other books that she has written since being animal based. She is working on two new books, one called Simple, Seasonal, and Primal Living, and Returning to Our True Nature. Her most recent book is titled The Homesteaders Journal, which she released earlier this year. She has also written several ebooks, including Freedom from Fatigue, Trauma, and Tension. Freedom from Fatigue, Trauma, Tension, and Nervous System Regulation, and Raising Happy and Healthy Chickens. You can find Faith on her website at www.faithcanter.com and on Instagram at plant-based to animal-based, and that handle has underscores between each one of the words. Faith Canter, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to talk to you.
It's an honor to host you. I realized there was way too many commas. There were already commas between the books that you've written and commas in the titles of the books you've written. So I got a bit confused there. But I told you off air, you are absolutely prolific with your work. You're putting out so much content and so many books. Yeah, hard to stay on top of. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to have a chat with us. When I reached out to invite you onto the podcast and just to see if there would be an interest, your enthusiasm, you just responded right away. We're just like, yes, I would love to come on. It was really nice to hear that enthusiasm. And so I know you've got a lot going on where you live, but I really do appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate your energy as well.
Thank you. It's easy when it's something you're passionate about, isn't it? So,
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And before we get into your amazing story and your path to healing from a lot of different things, I do have to ask you, where are you calling in from? And why did you decide to call in from where you're calling in from?
I am in central rural Portugal and I have been here for almost 8 years, living off grid on a farm. And I, uh, I was married. I lived in Scotland. That didn't work out. So when it didn't work out, I sold everything, bought a camper van, and decided I was going to travel to Asia over the next 2 years and set up some sort of off-grid lifestyle there. But I only got as far as Portugal. So that's how I ended up here.
It just sounds, the concept of that just sounds so lovely. I think more people kind of long for that experience, but feel too tied to where they are or their careers or all these other things that we prioritize. So I just, the concept of that, I don't know that I would have the personal courage to just grab a camper and get to wherever I got to and just post up there. But I have a lot of respect for it. I think it's amazing. And I'm sure um, you've just had some amazing learnings in your own personal life from living kind of off the grid and getting to know the like we mentioned in the introduction, the cycles of life, the cycles of nature, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's the best thing. I knew that I lived in Edinburgh, so I knew that living in a city or even in a town was not the most healthiest thing for me, or for anyone really. So it was always kind of this vague dream in the background to live a much healthier life, and not just for me, but also for the planet as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. The closest I think I could ever get to that was probably the pandemic. My wife and I were working for the same company, and they put us on unemployment, and so everything for us really slowed down and kind of stopped essentially. And that everywhere in the planet was a little bit different, but around here the messaging was not so much a lockdown, but was more like just don't go anywhere. So we just stayed in our neighborhood, and running our own business now, we're fortunate enough to live in the same neighborhood and have a little bit more free time than we did before. And I can say that even just in the last 5 years of just walking around the neighborhood and getting to know the lake nearby and like all the birds, and you understand their seasons a little bit better, and you do feel more connected. And that's, I mean, I'm in the suburbs of a major city. That's not what you're doing off the grid. So I can't even imagine the degree to which you get to sense that and really kind of sync up your own life to the cycles of the earth. And like you said, know that you're doing the best thing for yourself and your health, but also doing the best thing for the earth as well. Must be an incredible feeling.
Yeah, and it deepens with time, it deepens with every month and every season and every bird and every animal that's born or dies, or it just, the whole experience just keeps on deepening. And it is the way we really should be living. That's the way we were kind of designed, in air brackets, to live. And it's no surprise to me that so many of us have become so unwell when we live in boxes and look at screens and don't actually connect with nature in any way, which is part of us. We are part of it.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. Well, you do amazing content, and I really, as I was going through your channel, I really enjoyed the interviews that you conducted. You did a great job interviewing Sally Norton, who we've had recently on the show, and I've met her a few times. Leah Keith is an amazing person. We've had her on the show several times, and you do really great at interviewing. And because I got so sucked into watching your interviews, I actually didn't get to know very much about your own personal story. You're such a good interviewer, and you are really good at muting yourself and letting your guests speak. So now I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put myself on mute and ask you to tell us about your journey through, health, what it was like to break out of the city, what things you experienced. I know that you have quite the story of a lot of nervous system kind of issues, and that's also a kind of a story that ties into diet quite well. So can you share with us kind of your personal story of how that all evolved?
It's quite a long story, so I will do my best to keep it short-ish. Um, I I suffer from depression and anxiety and just generally hating on myself and life from as early as I can remember, from teenager age at least. I was ill quite a lot. Then the illnesses became more frequent, and the mental health stuff became more intense. And I ended up with loads of food intolerances and loads of digestive problems. And I just kind of collected ailments, I guess, along the way. And then I found myself with chronic fatigue syndrome, which was just completely just felt like, at the time, it destroyed my world. I was ill, bedbound, housebound for about 6.5 years. But that was one of my greatest teachers. And I really believe that every health condition that we go through can be one of our greatest teachers. It taught me that how I was living in the world, in my body, my thoughts, everything, how it was fueling my ill health. And when I got over that, I was a completely different person. I changed my diet, I changed my views on life, and that really spurred me to want to have a different way of living, not just living on the edge of a city and working to, was it, what there's a saying, working to live or something. I can't remember what it is. But just 9 till 5 or 9 till 9, often, just working and wishing for the next holiday. And I wasn't fulfilled. I had lots of money, a great life, lots of holidays, and I just felt really unhappy still, with that. So when I recovered from the chronic fatigue syndrome and IBS and a few other things, um, that was there, that life, it needs to be different. It needs to be different somehow. Um, to recover from chronic, well, if I could just go back a little bit, actually, in those years, because I was trying really hard to become well, I had become plant-based. I'd actually was vegetarian from the age of 9.
Wow.
And my mum thought it was a fad. She allowed it. I'm stubborn. I continued it. So it just continued, and it got worse. As my health got worse, I invested more in that way of that lifestyle because I thought that's how I would be healthy. So I was pescatarian, then vegetarian, then vegan, then raw vegan, keep chasing the next thing that was going to make me better kind of thing. I even considered breatharian and fruitarian at some points. I really thought there's another way, there's something else, it's something that's going to make me better. And when I recovered from the chronic fatigue syndrome, I'd actually gone a little bit back the other way, and I was eating a little bit of fish and I was eating eggs again because I just felt I've just the vegan, raw vegan, and all of eating all these seeds and these nuts and these weird and wonderful superfoods shipped in from all over the world. I was spending a fortune on supplements. You know, I was still my digestive system was a wreck. I was I just felt awful still, and everyone's like, just keep going, it'll pass, you'll get better, have more fruit juice, have more raw cake, have more, I don't know, weird and wonderful supplement from the other side of the world. And it never did. So I had gone back to, at that point, eating some fish and eggs, but I was quite intolerant to dairy still then. So I wasn't having anything like that. And there was not, no, there wasn't even a tiny, tiny speck inside of me that would have even considered meat or, animal proteins or anything like that, because I believed everything that I had listened to all that time. I believed that it was really bad for my health. I believed it was really bad for the health of the planet. And I just believed it wasn't the way that we were meant to thrive. So that was all good. I recovered, and that's, then my relationship with my husband broke up, and I was like, right, this is an opportunity to change how I live. Like I said, I was living on the edge of a major city, which has its perks, but also many, many negatives as well. And I was just like, it's now or never. I'm not that, this is a major life change, and I either embrace it or I just carry on doing the same as what I've always been doing. And I really honestly believe, especially from the years of being really chronically ill as well, that we are given these opportunities. We can feel that the world is against us, life is against us, and everything is really awful. Or we can embrace it. We can ask what the lesson, the learning, the gift is in it. And, it was very difficult splitting up with my husband. But I embraced that opportunity. I was like, right, that's it then. There is a reason this is happening. There's a reason that we're not meant to be together anymore. And there is a reason, there is another direction for me. So, as I said, I sold everything and I bought a camper van. And then it was about, well, I ended up here 8 years ago, and I've been living off grid in various different places, buses, geodomes, communities, and then the last couple of places have been my own. But about 3.5 years ago, I just collapsed out of the blue. I've spent years feeling pretty good, strong, healthy, working the land, all of that kind of thing. And then I was just collapsed. And it kept happening. And the Portuguese health service are actually really good if they consider it an emergency. And they rushed me through loads of tests at the hospital. And it turned out I had 3 heart conditions. I had an autoimmune condition, thyroid nodules, and a seriously screwed up thyroid levels as well. And their suggestion was meds and then eventually an operation, because one of the heart conditions was a heart prolapse, so a physical condition. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. I'm not taking medicine. I'm not having any operations, and I'm not rolling over. I'd been told I couldn't recover from chronic fatigue syndrome, so I've been told things like that before. So I was like, yeah, I'm pretty certain that there is a way. So every way that I researched, though, took me to animal proteins and fats. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. This is not where I want to be going. This is against everything I believe in, everything all my books were about things like plant-based living and stuff like that. But it kept happening. Like every story I read, everything I looked into, it was, this is the way you do it. It become apparent to me that the 30 plus years of being veggie, vegan, raw vegan, pescatarian had seriously depleted my reserves in my body, and my body was not able to repair itself anymore. Hence the multiple fairly serious health conditions. So one day I just decided my health was worth it. And I went and I got some liver, some beef liver, and I just ate it raw. Because I was like, if I'm doing this, I'm going all in.
That's all in. That is savage.
I was like, I need to get as much nutrients as possible, as quickly as possible, to see if this is really, going to work for me. So for the first year, I ate a bit of organ meat, heart, liver, that kind of thing, and predominantly beef, but not every day really, and not definitely not every meal. But a year later, the thyroid levels were back to some sort of normality. There was no thyroid nodules anymore. The Hashimoto's, the autoimmune condition, the antibodies were coming down. And there was not one of the heart conditions that I had been told I had the year previously, much to the shock of my doctor.
Wow.
And but about 6 months after that, I started with perimenopause, which in this day and age is kind of normal for my age, but it isn't normal. Women in their 40s should not be going through menopause and things like that. So I knew something wasn't still right. So I wanted to frequently murder people. My hormones were like that, wired. And the hot flushes, I've never known anything like it. So I was like, right, I need to up my game. So that's when I started having animal proteins and fats with every meal. And it was about 3 months, I think, the perimenopause had completely gone. I've been tested for my hormone levels since, nothing there. It's just gone. And yeah, I just felt like, I guess, a normal human being again as well. So that was a result. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am. I have also, last year I decided to go a low oxalate, um, and found Sally Norton and all of her work. And that was amazing to start with. I had heard of oxalates a few years ago when I was vegetarian. I was like, don't be ridiculous. What do you mean plants are killing us? That's nonsense, and I completely written it off. But now I was obviously in the place I was like, okay, you're still having quite a lot of plants in your diet. Although I was eating a lot of animal proteins, I'm still eating quite a lot of plants. Let's give it a go. Let's see. But as you might have noticed, I'm a bit all in or all out.
I did notice
So I
that.
did exactly So I did exactly what Sally says not to, and I cut them all out. And the first 5 weeks, honestly, I felt like Superwoman. It was amazing. my brain was on fire, my body was on fire. I hardly needed any sleep. It was amazing. But then boom, the oxalate dumping started. And that has been pretty horrendous because of the years of being, a super healthy air brackets veggie vegan. Everything I was consuming was high oxalates. There's the tahini and the tahini and almond butters and the almond milks and almond flours and dark chocolate and like every single food. And I think I calculated I was consuming probably like 200 times more than the recommended
Oh my
amount from
goodness.
like Sally and stuff daily. So the oxalate dumping has been quite intense, and that's also led to the oxalate dumping flared a histamine response as well, which I never had because I've been big into fermenting. That's high histamines, that kind of thing. So that and a bile problem from doing too quick a transition to basically carnivore ended up I became really quite unwell. And everyone's saying, do lion, you'll be better if you do lion, just keep going. And I'm like, okay then. And I did lion, and that was the worst I felt in a very long time. So it was just a really good lesson to me to listen to my own body, and not be maybe so pushy with myself, and needing to do it all. And that's why I've kind of come back to, and I call myself plant-based rather than carnivore or keto or anything like that, because my diet consists of, I would say, 90% animal proteins and fats, and 10% veg, um, oxalatey foods, to keep this dumping from getting too intense again. So, but this is all, I've been through all these difficulties with the transition, and I feel super passionate now about helping other people that might have the same sort of difficulties, particularly people that have been veggie and vegan, being transitioning, because it's difficult mentally and physically. If you've been in that world and you believe all those things, and your body you've basically been poisoning your body. So yeah, that was a very long short version of how I got to be here.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I've got several questions. I want to start with kind of the most recent. When you decided to try the low oxalate diet, were you aware of what might happen if you cut them out too soon and you decided to do it anyway, or were you just unaware of kind of what would happen? Because yeah, for me, I transitioned more gradually, but I would think like if I were told that spinach were bad, beets were bad, chard was bad, I would want it out like immediately, and I would have to deal with those severe dumping issues. Again, I was fortunate; mine just ended up being a little bit more gradual. But were you aware what might happen if you cut them all out at one time, or unaware and it surprised you?
I was aware that you could have oxalate dumping, but I just assumed it's like detoxing. And I'd done many, many detoxes over the years from various, heavy metals and yeasts and parasites and things like that. And I was like, yeah, you'll feel a bit rubbish for a bit and that'll be okay. So I was like, what's the worst that can happen?
Especially after 5 weeks of feeling amazing to then feel
Yeah.
like terrible for sure. And yeah, again, if I learned that eating spinach was like chewing up sandpaper or glass and it's just going to tear up your stomach, and that's the mechanical form of oxalate, not even the ionic form that does way more damage once it gets in the blood. I wouldn't want to be told that every third day or every second day you should have a little bit of it, or you should make black tea, or eat half a sweet potato. Like I would want it out forever. Yet the problem that Sally explained so well in the interview you did with her is if you cut it out all at once, your body finally has a chance to say like, great, let's get this stuff out of here, and it can do just as much damage, if not more, getting out all at the same time versus getting in a more gradual way. So yeah, I was just curious about that.
Yeah. I was not aware of how severe it could be for some people. I definitely, if somebody had told me you could potentially damage your kidneys or something like that, I might have thought, you know, just keep a little bit of oxalate in or something. But that is one of my symptoms when the oxalate dumping starts, is I have kidney pain. So,
Oh,
so that's a real worry then. It's like, okay,
yeah,
you need to do something about this now.
gotcha.
Um, but from what I have been doing over the last few, like since last year, the oxalate dumping is getting further apart and is becoming less severe. So it, you know, I think we're also told it can last 10 years, the oxalate dumping, and that's pretty scary
Yeah,
thought. But I think if you really look after yourself and listen to your body and um, do the research and things like that, then it it may still last 10 years, but I'm hoping that, you won't even notice it's happening
yeah.
anymore, kind of
Gra-
thing.
Gradually improves, like you said, getting a little bit better, less severe, less frequent.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I've heard stories out there, and it is shocking how long after somebody cuts it out, they can still experience things. Or, like you said, like the bile, for a lot of people, they don't produce the same bile anymore and have to take, digestive enzymes, for example, for a really long time afterwards. And yeah, that's just kind of the reality of us deciding, what is the best food for us, what is the best food for the planet, without really, considering what the true impact was. And that takes me back to 9-year-old stubborn you. Why did you decide to be vegetarian to begin with?
My friend did it, who was older than me. She was 2 years older. She lived in the same street. Her and her sister decided they were going to be veggie. Her sister was another 2 years again. So, I guess they had seen something or heard something. I can't remember what at the time, because it obviously back then there wasn't that many veggies around and stuff like that. But I remember her saying one day, those lambs in the field, that's that's what people are eating. And I was like, and I guess it never dawned on me. I was a child, kind of thing. And
Of course.
I went home and I was like, I'm going to be vegetarian. And my mum went, yeah, okay then. Thinking that would be it. And then my sister joined in as well, and she was 2 years younger than me. So like there was a whole load of us friends in the street. And I'm probably my parent, all the parents had bets on how long it would last or something. But yeah, I'm stubborn, and obviously I started to hear more and read more and things like that, and I got stricter and stricter.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very similar to Lierre's story. And as she says, this is how a lot of people get into it. And it's for the most amazing intentions. Like people that want to do that, I have a ton of respect for, and I love the reasons that you do it for. It's just it's not the reality, unfortunately, but it's always great intentions that somebody would do that. And through your journey, as you were getting stricter, I think one of the most difficult things that you kind of alluded to would be already knowing that you're doing the best thing. Like you're at least that one thing, the eating, you've got it down. Like that's the best part of everything that's going on. I don't know why I'm experiencing all these other chronic health issues, but it's certainly not the diet. And if it is, it's kind of like, like you mentioned, like the carnivore suggesting you got to be more and more and more carnivore, which isn't the best advice to give to everybody all the time. It's kind of the same thing. It's like you start doubling down. It's like, oh, maybe I'm cooking my vegetables too much. I need to do raw, and like press into some of those more and more extreme diets that unfortunately cause more of the issues that you think that's the one thing that's helping you along the way with those issues.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so that's why then you consider fruitarian and breatharian and
Right.
all this craziness, because you're like, well, yeah, I have to double down. What other option is there? I'm not
Yeah.
going to just sit here and wait to, I don't know, turn into, rot or something.
Yeah.
You feel so unwell that you have to keep trying.
Yeah, and yeah, Lear describes like having that energy worker, read her energy and say you've got no chi, like there's no life force in you, and she
Mm.
had already destroyed her health and got backed into this corner of the realization that I'm going to have to do this. I don't want to do this. She probably still doesn't want to do it for many reasons, but she's just understood that, like, for her to live, for anything to live, something else need to die. What was that process of acceptance like for you? Because that would be incredibly challenging on many, many levels, from the taste, the preparation, smells, and also the spiritual side of things, of like, I'm taking a life, I'm killing a life. What was that process like for you of kind of learning the truth about that?
Yeah, very, very challenging. But I had done a lot of work on myself mentally by then. I was in a good place mentally. So I understood what I was doing to myself again through my thoughts I was having about eating animal proteins and things. When I started to do it, I gave myself headaches. I've made myself my digestive system upset. I was really feeling guilt and shame and all of this stuff. And then a few weeks into it, I was like, "You've got to stop this, Faith. This is pointless. You're not uptaking these nutrients. This animal has died for nothing. You've got to stop this. You've done the research. You understand why this is helpful for you. You understand how it's going to help your health. What you're doing right now, Faith, is not helping your health." So that I just had to have a talk with myself. And, it's not nice now. I have a lot of vegan, veggie friends and stuff. They share stuff on social media, and I find it challenging to see an animal, suffering. So that's why part of the reason to live the way I live on a farm is I have my own animals. So yes, you get attached to them and stuff like that, but they have had the best possible life right up until the moment they don't. And if it's not my own animals, then I have friends with happy farms, as kind of thing, who have also, I have friends here that their animals are like their dogs and cats, their sheep and their goats and their pigs and stuff. They're really treated like part of the family until the moment they're not. And what Leah says a lot is, like, you can't have like a vegetable garden without animals. You're either shipping fertilizer in from halfway across the world and it's all chemically produced or something, or it's coming from animals. So it's like, when you understand that every part of life, animals need to be involved in. They're here to regenerate the soil and to fertilize the garden, um, and here in central Portugal, they help to keep the fire safe. We get a lot of wildfires, so that they're here, they're eating the all the bush and stuff that could easily set on fire. So that that it's we all have to work together, to for this for our own health and for the health of the planet. It's not one or the other, or it has to be a joint, a cycle. It's a cycle of life.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Well said.
I can't. I don't know if I answered your question. Then I kind of went on a tangent.
No, that was great. That was beautiful. No, and you mentioned Leah again, and her her hilarious and really revealing story about trying to grow her own lettuce, and the slugs that kept eating the lettuce, and she couldn't figure out how to get rid of the slugs. And she was so relieved when she gave up on gardening so she could go buy lettuce at the store, and it hit her like a ton of bricks. Well, who killed all the slugs that didn't eat this lettuce? Like, of course, somebody along the way has to, keep the vegetables growing without things eating it. And that's just the reality. Again, it's a hilarious story, but also very revealing. And learning that what she considered a line was actually a circle, I think, is a really good way to think about it. And so what you just said was really, really beautiful. Yeah. And so did you have the moment that every kind of former vegan talks about, when they have the first few bites and it's like fireworks, lights come on? Like, did you have an experience that was similar to that when you first started eating liver again?
No, I didn't. But I do. I have clients often tell me, they shoveled in sardine. Someone said the other day, she had a whole tin of sardines and she's just instantly felt better, kind of thing. And she'd been vegan for years. So I have clients tell me that, but I didn't have that kind of like my cells didn't all of a sudden feel like they were on fire, on fire in a good way or anything like that. Yeah, mine was, I guess, more gradual and maybe just because I really at that point I actually thought I was dying. I felt so bad.
Wow.
I was dizzy all the time and I just didn't feel in my body. So maybe, it was 30 plus years of eating that way. Maybe I was kind of it took time for my levels to build back up again, to make me feel human again.
Got it. Were you surprised at the changes in mental health and in particular some of the things you mentioned like depression, anxiety, and that kind of thing getting better?
Well, they'd already gone anyway because I'd done a lot of work on trauma and things like that over the years anyway. So I felt in a pretty good place mentally. Maybe not always so strong as I could be mentally. The ways of the world felt heavy. But yeah, I see it often with clients that I think everybody embarks on this for physical changes, whether that's to lose weight or to heal something or something like that. And I often see people's mental health improve drastically.
Me too. It's so cool that this emerging field of metabolic psychiatry is also using science to prove that that's actually happening and showing the mechanisms of that. And so, very promising to see that kind of emerge. And then I wanted to ask you when you were kind of trying to decide what plant foods you still wanted to include in the diet. Obviously, everybody's a little bit different as far as this goes. But what things have you found to be perfectly safe to include with your animal-based diet that you also enjoy and don't tend to cause a lot of problems?
Well, I'm a really big believer in eating seasonally and locally, because we just, because I'm a fermenter as well. I'm all about the microbiome all the time and things like that. So I know that we don't have the microbiome to be eating things out of season. It makes it much more difficult for the body. We're giving ourselves the nutrients we don't require in certain months and not the ones we do require and stuff like that. So I always say to people, if you can eat seasonally and locally, for that reason. So that's what I tend to do is and then I don't react like even I've always had a bit of a problem with dairy. I didn't eat it for many, many years because I had a really big problem with it. But recently I found I can eat it in spring when it would be naturally abundant anyway. I can have goat and sheep dairy and stuff, and it'd be totally fine, no reaction at all. The rest of the year, that's different. And I really think that's the same for most people, is that if you're eating it from local and seasonal source, it's local seasonal sources, we have the microbiome for that. We can utilize the nutrients better. It doesn't interfere with us as much. We're not then eating the same foods every week, which depletes essential enzymes and things like that. So it gives the body time to, can't remember the word I'm going to say. It gives the body time to heal, even if you eat the wrong foods then. So yeah, at the moment in Portugal, it's very much kind of cabbage, onion, garlic, broccoli, cauliflower, those sorts of things. So that's kind of what I have when I have them, but they're not very high in oxalates.
Right.
So then I have to consider the oxalate stuff. So the oxalate is difficult for me, for the same reason you just said, actually, that this idea that these things that poisoned me for a good proportion of my life, I now have to consume. And I've spoken to Sally at length about these sorts of things, and she's like, "Yeah, just have some of the spinach or some sweet potato or something like that." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, it
I
just
don't want to.
it doesn't feel right to do that." So that this is a struggle for me, and I'm probably not having as much oxalates as I probably should, because they say you should dose it. You should have a certain amount, find what your kind of perfect amount is and have that kind of every day.
Yeah.
But you're also meant to mix up the oxalates so that you're getting different types of oxalates all the time, which also makes sense if you're trying to be more local and seasonal and things like that.
Exactly right.
Um, but yeah, the local and seasonal veg here, at least this time of year, is not high in oxalates. So that's when, unfortunately, I've kind of resorted to having kind of green tea, sometimes some chocolate, sometimes with, without sugars and nasties and stuff in it. And things like almond butter or something. If my kidneys start to hurt, I just get a massive scoop of almond butter and I just eat that, and that's usually, I'm pretty good then. So yeah, as the seasons change, there will be a few more foods that have a few more oxalates in them again. Like spinach is just coming now, but yeah, it's going to be interesting trying to eat the spinach, knowing that it's so bad for me
Totally. Well,
and that
I
I
mean,
juiced it for so long.
oh, yeah. Yeah, I know. I did too. And like looking back, you see it for what it is, this toxic, nasty sludge in a blender that you think is saving your health. And it's just, yeah, you totally see it in a different light. And I think the seasonality is such a key thing that most people miss. Like I remember asking my grandparents a few years ago, like, did you guys remember eating spinach growing up? And they said yes. But it wasn't all year. Like you had it for a few weeks, maybe. Um, and maybe some years you didn't, but that was it. Like you could not consume it all year. It would not be possible. And from what I know about Portugal's climate and from what you experience on your property, where you are, do you see a vast array of diversity in the types of plants that are able to grow around you? Do you see lots of different like flowers and bushes and trees and all that kind of stuff, different grasses? Is there a pretty wide variety of different plants that grow pretty well where you are?
Yeah, and particularly in the spring, we get all of our rain in the winter and the spring. We don't get anything kind of summer and into the beginning of autumn, really. So this time of year, everything's popping. There's tons of things to forage for. There's tons of things growing. There is a much bigger variety of things. But you haven't quite got your kind of summer foods coming yet. The things like peppers and aubergine and courgette, and that'll all come. So it's still winter veg, but there is much more of an abundance of it, and it grows much quicker and much easier.
Got it. Okay. So on that note, do you still kind of look around and say like, yes, I can forage for things. I can find a few things, but does it ever like surprise you? Not surprise you, but do you ever marvel at like how little actual food there really is like growing? Like there are tons of plants, tons of varieties, but there's not just like tons of fruit like hanging around ready for you all the time. Like carrots don't just spontaneously grow and look like the carrots that we see at grocery stores. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you ever like look around and say like, what? There's just so little actual edible food, even like calorie wise. It would be so hard to live off of the land if you were only eating plants because yeah, there's so many plants that grow amazingly, but there's so few of them that really have actual like edible human food. Is that something you've noticed?
Well, I would say, because it's much hotter here, there's a lot of fruit that grows here all year round, different fruits, but it's so high in sugar, all of it. So if you did just have that, when I was considering being fruitarian, for instance, and stuff, your insulin levels are just going to be totally screwed. It's like I talk about eating seasonally and locally, but the fact is that a lot of our fruits and vegetables are not like they used to be.
Well
They've
said.
all been we've all been modified. We everyone's obsessed with genetically modified stuff these days, but we've been modifying our food for decades and decades, probably much longer than that actually. So yeah, it's we want to eat seasonally and locally if we're going to eat plants, but it's also remembering that, you know, one orange now has probably got just as much sugar as 20 oranges, a few decades ago or something.
Yeah.
So it's they're very different things that we're eating now, and the vegetables as well. So you could maybe get by for a while here, just on what you could find because it's Portugal, and there is more variety of, like I said, fruits and things growing all and vegetables growing all year round than there is, say, in the UK where I come from. But I think you would become very ill very quickly, if you were only doing that.
Yeah, good point. I really appreciate that. And yeah, when I lived in Brazil, the diversity of like fruits and vegetables that we had available was way more vast than it was here in America. And like knowing that in America, I know of one banana that we have, the Cavendish banana. It's like the one kind you can really buy. And in Brazil, there was like 10 different kinds, and they had seeds. And like I almost broke my tooth eating a grape, the first grape I ate down there, because it had a giant pit in it, and we're not used to that here. We don't even have seeds in our watermelons. So yeah, we have been messing with that kind of stuff for a long time. So that's a really, really good point. I appreciate that insight from you. When you decide to kind of change your diet, and you're not wanting to, you know, eat the animal products, I, I think it's also extremely difficult when you've been in the community for a long time and now you're facing potentially leaving a community. You know, if you had written the books, if you had created some content, if you had made your friends, like it would be incredibly difficult to you know, take a different path and leave all that behind, because it does become your identity to some extent. And so I'm just wondering what that process was like for you. Did you get a lot of hate? Was it very difficult? Did you lose friends? Like, how did that go for you?
Yeah, I had quite a lot of nasty comments, when I first started, kind of, and I didn't even say, eat the meat or anything like that. I was like, this is what I've been going through the last year. This is the things that I've found have helped me and why. And I just started putting a bit of content out like that. And I got things like, I hate failed vegans and blah blah blah. And people arguing with me that had just been like veggie or vegan for like 5 years or something, and saying, you can get everything you need and blah blah blah. And I said, yeah, you can, definitely, for 5 years. It takes 3 years for your B12 to disappear from meat. So you can probably feel okay for a good 5 years, maybe even 10. Some people even 15. Leah was 20, you know, but every single person eventually does, everyone I've met so far anyway, does end up with, feeling seriously unwell, usually with autoimmune conditions or serious hormone problems or infertility, something like that. And then they eat the animal protein, and then all of a sudden they start to feel better again. So, and these are people as well, like me, that weren't eating the vegan junk that is out there now. There's so much of that kind of junk food, out there, that, I think that actually perhaps a lot of veggies and vegans won't even last as long as kind of us old school veggies and vegans did. I think I've gone on a tangent again and not
No,
answered your
it's great.
question.
It's great. I'm just thinking we're going to post this video to YouTube, and we'll see how much hate you get from the carnivore community when they found out that you eat seasonal onions and sometimes eat broccoli and cauliflower. Maybe we'll get some nasty comments from the carnivores saying you're destroying the plants and all that kind of thing. No, it's
Yeah, sorry, broccoli's a really bad one, apparently. I keep being told that.
uh,
Uh,
yeah, I understand, but it has been interesting to see that, like, yeah, when we get hateful comments, it's from the vegans, it's from the plant-based, it's not from, carnivore people. They tend to just not really care that much, and they're happy that you found this way of eating and they want to share, and they're passionate like you are to get the message out. But we're not trying to tell vegans they're stupid. I've been told many times by vegans that I'm stupid. So it's very interesting to see those reactions. So yeah, I really appreciate all that and appreciate your passion and that story through transition. Again, it's not just the food you're eating, it's a community that you're leaving. So I appreciate that whole journey. I wanted to save a little bit of time to talk to you about some of the things that you have worked on in the past that are unrelated to diet. And one was your work with your own mental health. And you alluded to it earlier, and I've heard you talk about it on another podcast that wasn't really diet related, but you seem to have this ability to take something that was really challenging and to kind of switch the mindset about it. And one thing that really stuck out at me that I want to do more of in my own life when things get challenging is being able to appreciate the things around you. Like I don't want to steal your own story, but I believe you were feeling bad that you were kind of bedridden and couldn't work, but you also realized that the people that were going to work were so busy they weren't able to notice nature. And again, I don't want to steal your story from you, but I thought that was a really interesting example of like a reframing the mind. And can you tell the listener some of the things that you do with your clients and maybe in your own personal journey, how you were able to reframe challenging times to be, again, like you mentioned, like really positive things and teachers for us?
Well, there were a couple of things that inspired me and made me realize what I was doing with my kind of continuous negative thinking. And that one of those was The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. Fantastic book, and man. And another one was Billy Connolly. I don't know if you would know of him. He's a massive Scottish comedian.
Okay.
He tours all over the world, but he's big for us people from the UK. And he was abused by his aunts when he was a child, and he says in one of his books, I could keep replaying that, keep being the victim, but then they've won. They've still got a hold over you. So those two things in my, I read those books, and they've just stayed with me that my whole life, that I have a choice. I can choose to see the worst in myself, see the worst in life, see the worst in this world and how it is functioning, air brackets, again, or I can choose to find the best in it. And I said a little bit earlier that when I was married, I was very lucky. We had a lot of money, we had a big house, we had lovely cars and holidays and stuff, and I was deeply unhappy. I had a beautiful man, a beautiful everything else, and I was deeply, deeply unhappy. And that's because I was choosing that. Yes, there were definitely imbalances, probably brought on by, not good nutritional choices and things like that. But, a lot of it I was just doing to myself. I kept choosing lack. I kept choosing less. I kept choosing, um, to look at the negative in everything. And I decided that I had to stop doing that. I had to start living. So, to start with the first year or even two, that is challenging because you're trying to rewrite, a habit, that you've had your whole life. But I would just keep doing it. And I asked my clients to do that, is to, when you notice that you're doing that, so that might be a few minutes or a few hours or a few days later, then you can, do something about it. But don't give yourself a hard time if you've been lost for that time, because that's pointless also. But the more you practice it, the easier it comes, and it's just natural then. So now what happens is something challenging or triggering will happen, and there's an instant, you clench, you feel a bit tense, you can feel that energy there, and then it's like, okay, well, this is happening for me. There will be a lesson, a redirection, a blessing in there somewhere. And I know that's difficult when you're in it and it's intense, whatever it is that you're going through. But it allows us to move through things much quicker and to see those blessings. Chronic fatigue syndrome gave me my life back. I was killing myself before that, mentally and many other ways. What happened 3.5 years ago, collapsing and stuff, that's completely changed the trajectory of my life, of, of my, I guess it's just solid. It's made everything brighter. I think that's the way to put it. Everything sparkles more, everything is lighter, there is less intensity, because it just reinforced the fact that this is happening for me. There is a reason that you go through the bad times. to learn some lessons to help you to thrive instead of barely surviving, which is what most of us have been doing most of our life.
Yeah. Well, it's a lovely sentiment and something I wish I could get better at. So I'll have to remember that next time I'm facing something challenging. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about is has your journey into, I, I guess, minimalism, realizing that you were accumulating stuff and then getting rid of that stuff. How has that helped you, um, with connecting with the earth and realizing that you'd accumulated too many things?
It helps on a lot of different levels. When I used to talk to people a lot about detoxing and stuff, that was kind of my thing many years ago. I would always say you need to declutter if you want to detox as well, because that's mental clutter when when everything is around us and there's a lot of stuff and you can't find things and you're not making space for new stuff. So when I left Scotland and I just sold everything apart from pretty much what would fit in the van and a couple of boxes that I left in my dad's cellar, in his attic. Um, that felt like I felt the lightest I'd ever felt, to get rid of everything that I'd collected for all those years. It was such a crazy feeling. But when you find yourself in a home again, you start collecting again. It's, I don't know, a little magpie or something. You just like suddenly like, ooh, all of these things
Totally.
start appearing again. So, for me, it's almost like spring cleaning. It's like, right, let's get rid of this stuff that's stagnant and doesn't serve me anymore. And I think for me, it also feels good to pass it on to people that would benefit from it as well.
Great point.
But also recognizing that you don't need it if you're outside with your feet on the ground. You don't need all these gadgets and gizmos and various other things if you're actually living a more natural life. If we're eating more natural foods and we're getting the light in our eyes and on our skin and drinking good water and getting our feet on the ground, then why do we need the rest of it?
Yeah, that's very, very well said. And yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really appreciated your journey and appreciated you stepping out of the sunlight to come and tell your story and share your passion with us today. Faith, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Well, I mainly hang out on Instagram. As you said, it's a newish channel. I only opened it about a week ago or something on there. That's plant-based, animal-based. But I have one from the farm as well, Project Roots Portugal, and I have my old one, Faith Canter, which if you scroll right back, you might find the odd thing about raw vegan cakes and stuff. But I have been slowly deleting all of that content. But I also hang out a lot on YouTube, and that's just Faith Canter on YouTube. And I have deleted all the old content on there from my plant-based days. There were about 500 videos that I
Oh
just
my goodness.
have all gone.
Well, for a limited time, you can go onto Faith's old Instagram accounts and learn how to make those delicious vegan raw cakes. But thank you for including those still. I don't know how appetizing that would be to our audience. And yeah, your YouTube channel is done really, really well. You have a cool kind of diversity of different videos that you offer and put out for free. So I really do appreciate that. And then you also offer coaching services. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've been doing that for a long time since I recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome. And that's, diet, nervous system, environment, we talk about everything. So I do one-to-one coaching. I also have a group that people can join. Um, I have some free courses. I have some really economically priced eBooks and short 6-week courses and things like that. So there's really a selection of all sorts of things on there depending on what your budget is or what your resources time wise and all of that are as well.
Yeah, that's very cool that you offer all of that. And that's all on your website.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. We'll link to all of that in the show notes so people can find that stuff really easily. And again, I think it's amazing that you're offering different services based on people's budgets and their needs and that kind of thing. So it's very, very kind of you and very kind of you to stop by and be hosted on our show today. We learned a lot and really, really appreciate you, Faith. Thank you so very much for being on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been an honor to host you. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.